Yuumi. No matter where she shows up, whether as a support in your enemy's bot lane or a 2-cost tour de force for an agonizing 5 weeks over the holidays, few League champions draw as much ire and frustration as Riot's iconic book-writing cat. If you played at all during Set 8, you no doubt ran into the cat and her cadre of super friends, and if you spent any time in Twitch chat or had a lobby chat on in your game, you saw no end of vitriol and abuse toward the cat and the players who chose to 3-star her and her crew. Yuumi was not the first reroll comp to exist in TFT, and it won't be the last. While reroll comps fall in and out of the meta periodically throughout each set, what is clear is that rerolling is an intended and viable strategy in TFT. It is consciously and deliberately built into the game by the developers, going all the way back to Gunslinger and Void Sins in Set 1. The way that we reroll has changed since then. Largely gone are the days of hyper-rolling for Woodland or Predator in Set 2. In Set 3, the concept of slow rolling for low-cost 3-star units hit the meta, and this has been the main methodology used in each reroll comp since then. And with the conception of rerolling came the stigma against it. Accusations have been made that rerolling is brain dead, only requiring enough skill to hit the D key enough times to pull your comp together and dominate the lobby. Go into any streamer's chat that is rerolling Draven, Lucian, Vex, or Pyke, and you'll see a deluge of badge emotes that follow, accusations of low skill, high reward gameplay being awarded easy top 4s, and frustration that something seemingly so easy is so often rewarded in TFT. If rerolling is so easy, why don't the top players do it every game? Why, in the Yuumi meta and others before it, didn't every player in Silver, Gold, or Plat simply re-roll the broken units each game and climb to Challenger? Could it be that reroll comps aren't actually as brain-dead D-key snooze fests as chat might like to have you believe? Today, I want to explore why reroll comps exist, and why they're actually not nearly as bad as their reputation makes them out to be. Why it's extremely healthy for the game to have these comps viable and playable regardless of the meta they exist in. As always, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and if you have a gripe or suggestion or agreement along the way, feel free to drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Let's get to it. Rerolling. But why? Before we get into it in earnest, I do have a confession to make. I do love me some reroll comps. I played Blender Nocturne like it was going out of style. I've rerolled Predators, Mech, Blade Master Xayah, Master Yi, Brand, Moonlight, Protector Kog'Maw, Ashe, Kayle, and absolutely Yuumi. I like the playstyle, and while it might lend my arguments a little bit of bias, I also think it lends them some credibility. I've spent the better part of the last 3 years learning and refining my play, not just of reroll comps, but of TFT in general. I don't always play reroll comps, but when I do, I enjoy myself. I suppose that's my biggest argument for rerolling. It's just a fun way to play the game. It allows me to have something to do or consider every turn, which is not always the case when you're playing a fast 8 meta or even playing econ comps like Pirates, Fortune, or Underground. A lot of time in TFT is spent doing a whole lot of nothing. Sure, I can scout the lobby, think about my units and their positioning relative to the others, but honestly, most decision making when it comes to scouting is done in the last few seconds before combat start, and in the early and mid game, more often than not, any fight that comes down to positioning is a coin flip in matchmaking. Look around at the 4 people you might be fighting, determine whether to position left or right based on what you see, and hope for the best. Granted, in stage 2, if you're re-rolling, you're mostly hoarding gold and trying not to lose too much HP, but one of the fun options that TFT provides is loss streaking, and playing a re-roll means you're looking to loss streak most of the time. This means that my scouting and positioning takes on a new flavor. How do I make sure I lose, but hopefully only by a little? When others in the lobby are also looking to loss streak, the econ you're going to need to build up quickly is at stake, and an unfortunate win on 2-6 can be devastating. This is a more complex series of decisions than left or right, and that's an interesting gameplay dynamic to me. Playing strongest board and looking to win streak is fun, especially when you hit Krugs with that 5-win streak, but I find successful loss streaking to be far more intriguing and rewarding style of gameplay. With all that said, I understand that my liking the gameplay of early game rerolling doesn't necessarily mean that it's good, and isn't a compelling logical argument, even if it might be a compelling appeal to emotion. I just wanted to get it out of the way early and acknowledge it. I am a dirty, degenerate reroller, and I'm tired of pretending that I'm not. So other than because I wanna, why reroll? What does it provide for the game itself? if you're the developers, why would you look at how people played in sets 1 and 2 and decide to design and build around that option? My main argument, first and foremost, is just variety, not variance, although that does have a role to play, and we'll get into that later. No, I just mean plain Jane variety. TFT is a complicated game, and it offers a lot of champions, synergies, items, and positioning options. In most games, in most metas, your goal is to build strong boards and items, deal damage to other players, continually transition into stronger boards, hopefully capping out with powerful 4 and 5 cost units in the late game. This is fine. This is the core gameplay of TFT, working with what the game gives you to iterate your board into increasingly stronger states until you win or are eliminated. However, if this is the only way to play, things are going to get stale fast. If the biggest decision you have to make is this an AD game or an AP game, followed by leveling and rolling for the same units at the same thresholds every single time, you're going to get tired of that in really short order. We do sometimes see this when certain units or comps are objectively overtuned. We've seen this with Samira in Zed early in set 8, Warwick and now TF here in set 8.5, and in earlier sets, Electric Zed, Dusk Riven, Sniper Jin, and Assassins anytime ever. You play the game making whatever decisions you need to make to hit the OP unit you need, and then the game kind of plays itself from there. As TFT has iterated upon itself, the developers have found all sorts of ways to add new variety to the formula, more balanced units, and if you think TFT is less balanced now than it was in the past, you've got some rose-tinted glasses on, man. The addition of augments and more versatile and buildable items. Even set-specific mechanics seek to add more variety over time. Say what you want about set 5, but it did bring us Radiant items. We've got Ornn Foundry items from set 4. The special hexes from set 2 have resurfaced as Socialite, Terra Monolith, and Infiniteam. The Colossus mechanic from set 6 was iterated on, for better or worse, in set 7 with dragons. All of these ideas have been introduced, modified, and reintroduced in new ways over time. At the end of the day, the core gameplay is still the same. Use your gold, HP, and items, and now augments, to build the best board that you can, with 1 and 2 costs for the early game, 3 and 4 costs to carry you into the mid game, and finally upgraded 4 and 5 cost units to cap your end game board. Do I carry Twisted Fate this game, or Nico? Do I look to itemize Samira or Warwick? Do my frontline items go on Echo or on... Well, I mean, yeah, they probably go on Echo. Reroll compositions offer us a completely different gameplay experience from this. Rather than focusing on leveling up, adding progressively more powerful units, you focus on spending gold to upgrade less expensive units to that 3-star tier. Rather than saving gold to level up, you save gold to roll. The leveling thresholds are different. The itemization is often markedly different. The tempo you play at is entirely different when playing a reroll comp. If you're lucky enough to hit your core units early, you can transition back to the quote-unquote standard gameplay model, leveling your board and splashing in more expensive units. But most games you're going to spend at levels 5, 6, and 7. It was extremely common to win out lobbies at level 7 with Kaisa Vayne Recon, or Protector Sniper, or Shredder Zaya. While the rest of the lobby is pushing levels and debating whether to try hit 9, a reroller is playing a decidedly different kind of game. This obviously falls apart a little when you have something like the Yuumi meta, when a comp is so overtuned that it inhibits variable or flexible play. It was common to see 3 or even 4 people trying to play Yuumi reroll, which was nice when you weren't one of those people because at least one of those players was going 8th guaranteed. But 2 or even 3 of them might top 4 because even Yuumi 2 with items was stable enough to keep you in the game well into stages 4 and 5. This, I think, is where a lot of the stigma comes from. When a comp in TFT is disproportionately powerful, it's almost always a reroll comp. This happens, I think, because playtesting can quite clearly show when a single unit is entirely too strong, and a lot of extremely powerful units have been brought down to manageable levels just during the PBE phase of a new set. I can remember Spirit Ari being wildly overpowered on the PBE, Moonlight Aphelios being somehow even more broken on PBE than he ever was on live, Unkillable Siphon, so many others. It's much harder to discern whether a combination of units is going going to be overpowered. We might see that certain arrangements are strong, but how much of that is items? How much of that is the particular lobby? The Moonlight trait was custom built for rerolling, but the cornerstone of Aphelios' power was actually his specific interaction with Guardian Angel, allowing him to output incredible damage while GA triggered, often clearing helpless boards while Aphelios was invulnerable during this agonizingly long GA resurrection animation. Aphelios without Guardian Angel, even 4-starred, was memeably bad. Reroll compositions usually aren't coming out of that playtesting environment, even with a synergy like Supers or Moonlight that's tailored specifically to empower rerolling. Early on in set 8, we saw reroll Ashe, Kayle, and Yasuo as popular options. The Yuumi variety wouldn't rear its head until much later, as it was stumbled upon and spread well past the PvE period of the set. Even varieties of that variety were developed over time as the Star Guardian variant of that standard Yuumi comp became popular. Players found new ways to optimize the meta. But in the best of times, reroll compositions offered a different way to play the game. Rerollers are playing at a different tempo from the lobby, trading HP and board strength early for big spikes later. It's also a risky style of play. If you don't hit those core units, you're going to bleed a lot of HP as other boards rapidly outpace your own. A bevy of 3-star 2 costs might be enough to beat powerful level 8 boards, but those same units at 2-star are going to get 8-0'd by that same opponent. Just hit isn't a meme. It's a mandate. And for every top 1 finish that Yuumi Hardforcer picked up, there was probably an equal volume of 8s or bot 4s at least, as they simply failed to hit their units in time to make up the difference. Part 2. Risky business. This 1st or 8th playstyle is worlds apart from standard ways of playing, where we're often making decisions to play for top 4, hoping to collect that 3rd or 4th place with a board that's good but not great. We see the same playstyle and mentality reflected in traits like Underground, Fortune, and Pirates, traits that use weak units to build up to a hopefully climactic and game-breakingly powerful payout. The key to these traits is always saving HP and managing to stay alive long enough to get the big payoff. And reroll comps work largely the same. You're kind of weak early, spike when you upgrade some of your units, fall off again as your upgraded units are weaker than other people's higher cost boards, finally capping out with numerous powerful 3-stars that can clear opponents' boards. The risk of not hitting those key units is not the only gamble that rerollers take. Itemization is often extremely important in reroll compositions. In my You're Using Guides Wrong videos, I discuss slamming items, making good but not optimal items to strengthen your board and preserve HP. Reroll comps often require precise itemization to work in a way that most other comps simply don't. Yuumi without blue buff and an AP item, Predator Cog or Mage Nami without Luden's Echo, Shredder Zaya without Last Whisper, Bang Bros Yi without Rageblade and RFC, all recipes for disaster. Blender Nocturne was unplayable without Blademaster Spat in a set where spatulas were considerably rarer than in more contemporary sets. This is offset somewhat by enjoying higher carousel priority thanks to early and mid-game loss streaking, but getting optimal items for your hyper carry is never guaranteed. I personally bot forward tons of Protector Sniper games just thanks to imperfect itemization. I bot forward Blender Nocturne games due to 0 spats ever appearing on carousel. Chances are good that if there's a reroll comp, I've bot forward it just based on bad itemization. This is probably the biggest reason why most reroll comps aren't simply hard forceable to Challenger. Variance. Variance is the difference from one game to the next, what we attribute to RNG when it comes to hitting or missing items, units, augments, etc. Variance comes in the form of different items and units on carousels, different augment choices at each breakpoint, and different roles in our shops. In 8.5, the glitched carousels offer even greater variance, as one is not even guaranteed to get a key unit if all the carousel items are eggs or anvils, as an example. You can have 17 Yuumis and still bot 4 if your starting items are Bobo Cloak. Many beginner or lower elo players will fail to see how much direction items are giving us each game, and may feel frustrated when they're finding their Lee Sin and Gangplank but no copies of their carry, even when their items should be leading them in an entirely different direction. Variance makes and breaks reroll comps. I learned to never play Yuumi without at least one tier at 2-1. And this never occurred to me when I was attempting and failing to reroll set 3 Xayah with no bows. You wouldn't try to play Warwick without bow items, but time after time, rerollers take free bot 4s thanks to forcing a comp without any of the essential items for that comp. Item variance hurts rerollers to a far greater degree than standard compositions. A Warwick without Titan's Resolve is still playable, if not ideal. A Vex or a Yuumi without blue buff, or at the very least Spear of Sojin, isn't going to put out nearly enough burst damage with nearly enough speed and consistency to win out a fight that would be trivial if they had that key item. Any competent reroller will tell you that a key skill is knowing when you simply cannot play the comp due to the circumstances of the game in the immediate. Part 3. To pay the bills, y'all. So far, I've talked about some of the challenges that come with playing reroll comps through the lens of variance. But what if we just take that out of the equation? Let's say you grab a gangplank with a tier from the opening carousel. During the stage 1 PvE rounds, you get dropped another tier and a Vex. Hey, you're perfectly primed to play Super's Vex reroll if you want to. It's all autopilot from here, surely. Hey, as long as your D key works, or at least your mouse can click that refresh button, you're on easy street, right? Refresh shop, get units, win game. Well, not exactly. You definitely have a great shot at being able to get your comp underway, but there's still many decisions that must be made from this point. This has always been my biggest gripe with the people who detest rerolling. The idea that rerolling is a simple process that doesn't require any effort on the player's part. Personally, I think the skills I'm about to discuss are at least on par with the skills needed to play a standard comp, and in many ways teach us an understanding of the game and its fundamentals in a far superior way than traditional playstyles. Am I saying that rerolling makes you better at TFT? Yes, I actually am. The first decision you have to make is a commitment early on. Am I going to play this reroll comp? Did I get a 2-1 hero augment that supports it, or a regular augment that could help me, like featherweights, combat training, or another suitable option for whatever I'm thinking about playing? You look at your items, your units, your economy, you look around the lobby and see what other people are doing, and you make up your mind. 2-1 is almost always when you've got to commit to a reroll comp, and most good players will tell you that 2-1 is when you should have enough direction to know what your final board is kind of going to look like, regardless of what you're playing, even if you're just making the decision AD or AP and going from there. All the information you need to commit to a reroll comp is also information you should be taking in no matter what you decide. Are there several other players going AD or AP that will be contesting you later in the game? How broad are your options when it comes to playing flexibly and letting the game give you direction? What items can you slam? What items are other people slamming at 2-1? This will give you a lot of information about what final compositions are going to be in the lobby, which will help inform your decision making throughout the whole rest of the game. And now, honestly, comes the hard part. Lost streaking through stage 2. Intentionally losing is harder than one might think in a game like TFT, and there is an art to losing the right way. We've got to balance holding on to key units, making econ thresholds, playing a board that's weak enough to lose to anyone in the lobby, but strong enough to reliably kill 1 or 2 units on any opposing board you might fight. We're committing to playing behind, HP-wise, but we want to be as healthy as we can before our board spikes, and we hopefully begin a win streak in stage 3. This sometimes means selling upgraded units that we won't be needing for our final board, selling pairs to make econ thresholds, greeting out our items, and thinking really hard about early game positioning, which means scouting the lobby, determining who you can beat and who you can't, and making adjustments accordingly. There will always be others in the lobby trying to win streak, but there's also others trying to lose streak, and making sure you can't beat anyone in the lobby is a key skill that goes unnoticed by the average player. Accidentally winning a fight at 2-6 can be disastrous for your economy, and early game economy is absolutely vital to playing almost all reroll comps you might come across. Getting to 50 as quickly as possible and having as much surplus gold to roll as possible is how we spike our stage 5 board and stem the bleeding as we look for 3 stars going into stage 4. So we're going to get into some math here. Brace yourself, hold on, it's going to be okay. If we're 40 gold on stage 2-6 and we lose, and that gives us a 5-loss streak, we'll go into Krugs with 52 gold. On 3-1, that puts us at 65 gold, plus any gold we may have gotten dropped from Krugs. If we're 40 gold on 2-6 and we win, that puts us on a 1-win streak, meaning we go into Krugs with 50 gold, and on 3-1, we only have 60 gold, plus whatever from Krugs. We just lost 2 whole rolls at least because of that 1 win. If we lost streak to 3-2, that puts us to 78 gold from streaking and interest, compared to 70 gold if we won on 2-6. That is an enormous swing in econ, and understanding how these wins and losses impact us not just in the immediate, but in the long term is an important skill to master in TFT. By 3-1, a reroll player must utilize numerous fundamental skills in order to create the best situation for themselves moving into the mid-game. Decision-making about items and positioning, scouting the lobby and predicting your opponent's intent, building your econ and playing the right board to ensure your best situation are all basic skills that are easy to understand but hard to master individually, let alone all together, let alone applied simultaneously every 30 seconds. Ensuring a win streak at 2-6 is equally fraught at times. But that's my point. The same skills are required for both through the early game, though it may seem like loss streaking is the easier of the two. Every stage requires information gathering and decision making, just like in any other comp that follows a more standard line. This is because fundamental skills are useful regardless of what lines you take, what meta is dominant in a given patch, or even what set you're playing. Reroll comps take these same fundamental skills and simply apply them in a different way, going at a different pace than the standard leveling and rolling thresholds. But because we're playing at a different pace, we're often playing behind the tempo of the lobby. And I think the final skill that rerolling teaches us is how to make good decisions when playing from behind. Maybe we had some good losses and are comparatively healthy, but oftentimes rerollers find themselves down a lot of HP going into the mid and late game. Inexperienced or undisciplined players will often say, I'm at 50 HP at 3-5 and I don't have 3 stars. If I don't roll to 0 here, I'm dead. Not that I've ever. Most rerolls rely on a power spike that comes relatively late into the game. If you're playing a supers comp, especially in 8.5, 3-starring Malphite or Lee Sin may not even be enough to stabilize your board in stage 3, and definitely not enough in stage 4. You need to hit multiple 3-stars, especially your carry, to compete with boards that are now level 7 and possibly 8, have rolled down for upgrades to 3 and even 4 cost units. You're beginning to face boards with a lot of power, and you're maybe even seeing the occasional 5 cost that somebody was lucky enough to hit. If most comps' tempo looks like a staircase as players spike at key thresholds, flatten off, and then spike again at the next milestone, reroll comps tend to look like a hockey stick, flat and weak for most of the game with a massive spike as key units are 3-starred and add tons of power to your board. Playing that far behind the tempo of the lobby for so long and having faith in your recovery requires tons of discipline and knowledge of the game. Knowing when your board needs to spike and how stable your board is compared to the lobby, and whether you're playing for a top 4 or in a spot where you can play the game. Knowing when you need to stop slow rolling and spend a lot of gold to hit your units, and when you can afford to greed out 1, 2, or 3 more rounds is tricky business, and making the wrong choice has ruined countless games that just as easily could have been winning spots. Knowing when and how to make these decisions comes with time and experience, and also employs that knowledge of the fundamentals of the game that I've hit on several times. It's also contextual. In a lobby with multiple prismatic augments or a 4/4/5 hero augment at 4/2, you might need to abandon rolling for some of those secondary upgrades in favor of leveling and adding more powerful units and synergies to your board, lest some high roller deal you 20 damage and all but guarantee your bot 4 finish. If the tempo of the lobby is slower and others are struggling to hit upgrades, you may be able to sacrifice a little more HP to maintain your econ to 3-star less vital units like Gangplank or Rel or Nasus or whoever it is that you need. All of these considerations lead us to a series of round-by-round observations, analysis, and decisions that can make or break your ability to succeed and gain LP from your lobby. There's a reason why challenger players can play the same comps as you and succeed where you fail. They're better at recognizing their own position relative to others and making correct decisions. If hard forcing a reroll comp to Diamond or Master required no skill, then why do only 3,000 players in NA reach Master every set? Conclusion. This isn't all there is to say, or even all I have to say about rerolls, but hopefully this gives a better foundation and understanding of rerolling's place in TFT and the skills required to play reroll comps successfully. Many will still think it lacks skill and is degenerate, but I think rerolling is a great option and demonstrates just as much skill expression as any other comp or line. If you've enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, consider supporting me on Patreon. Patrons get regular-ish updates for new content, can suggest topics for upcoming videos, and get access to new videos before anyone else. You can also make a one-time contribution by buying me a coffee at coffee.com. If things are tight, you can always just subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and recommend my video to your friends or whoever the hell you feel like sharing it with. But no matter what you do, thank you so much for watching. Good luck, Godspeed, and may more dogs smile upon your rowdown.